Who do you think should get winter fuel payments this year? Get your calls in. The Prime Minister has said his government is currently reviewing which pensioners should receive support with their energy bills later this year. He stands by his decision to withdraw the support from over 10 million pensioners, which he claims was because he'd inherited a broken economy. But Starmer now says the economy has stabilised and therefore Labour can look at giving the benefit back to some pensioners. Who should get the payment, though? Worth up to £300. One Treasury Minister has said millionaires shouldn't get the subsidy. Payments should be targeted to those who need them the most. OK, so if we establish there is a bit more money to spare, Russ, and this winter fuel payment, may be going to more pensioners, where do we draw the line?
We don't. Pensioners are pensioners. They have contributed to this country. It doesn't matter whether they've got £10 or £1 million. Why should they have something that has been instituted for quite a long while, taken away by a government who clearly don't know what they're doing because they've realised it's such a hot potato politically? What they have to do is go, oh, we can't hold that anymore, so we better change things back to the way that they used to be. And that's almost certainly, I think, what is going to happen. I don't think the wealth of a pensioner should dictate whether they get a winter fuel payment. Now, a millionaire pensioner may say, OK, I don't really need the money, but he may give it to charity. He may give it to his grandchildren, but he's entitled, or she is entitled, through their contributions over a lifetime of working, to get what all pensioners get, to differentiate between them just because of wealth is nonsense.
Is that what national insurance and taxes is, like a bank account where you pay in and then you withdraw at the end? Because I've never understood it like that. I thought that what we are as a society, and we have tax income,
of course we do.
We then allocate based on need, and if they don't need it, then why are they getting it?
Well, they're getting it because somebody decided many years ago in government that they should all get it. And then Labour came in and said, oh, we've got this terrible black hole, £22 billion. I think that's nonsense as well. We need to do this to fill the black hole. And the black hole, of course, has subsequently turned out to not really be a black hole. So in answer to your question, tax is tax. We all accept that and people pay it, and that's the way of the world. You are not entitled to a state pension, but you get one as it is at the moment, and you get the additional benefit of the winter fuel payment. And I think all pensioners should get it.
We've heard a lot, Tessa, this week about taco. Trump always chickens out. Is this stacco? Is this Starmer chickening out? Because winter fuel payments and withdrawing them has been used as a stick to beat him with, hasn't it? And Rachel Reeves.
Be in no doubt that our naive, greenhorned and somewhat tin-eared Prime Minister also has clay feet. He's handled this incredibly badly. He's marched all his men to the top of the hill and he's marched them halfway back down again, and they are spinning around and they don't have a map and they don't know what direction they're going in. However, Starmer isn't sitting there, but Russ Williams is. May I pick up a few of the points that...
Well, you can, with pleasure.
Elderly gentleman has made. Obviously, Russ
I'm not a pensioner, incidentally.
No, I know, but somewhat nearer the pensionable age than me, so this is...
Well, only currently they could shift it.
Getting your digs in early.
He's just storing it up for when he comes across the threshold. I think it's important to make a few points. This was introduced under a Labour premiership when Gordon Brown was at the helm.
Fine.
Since that time, the number of pensioners in poverty has halved. Now, that's partly because of the triple pension lock, and it's also partly because the three great areas that require welfare, the elderly, the disabled and sick, and children, pensioners are now the least poor of those three. So actually, the greater need doesn't sit with pensioners at the moment, it sits with children. But what do pensioners have that children, particularly children in poverty, don't have? They have the vote. And that is what makes me so cynical about the way this has been used as a political hot potato. It's quite wrong. Perhaps the pension tax credit level, I think it's £11,800. If you have an income that's stacked there or underneath that rate, then you would get this money still. That's perhaps too low. But the problem for the government now is if they raise that pension credit level, that will cost them a fortune.
And
So say
also-
they make it, it's going to be £12,500. Well, that is going to be another black hole for them.
Well,
so
also-
where do they draw the new line?
Well, universal credit, pension credit, those are gateway benefits which do open the door. If you don't use those as your line, where do you put it? It's going to cost a lot of money to administrate then as well, because you have to find a new line. I want to take as many calls as we can on this. Stephen is in Argyll and Butte, where it can get very chilly, Stephen. Did you previously qualify for the winter fuel payment? Are you in that ballpark?
I only apply for it if I need it, you know what I mean, at the end of the day. And as for the winter fuel payments, I think they should be paid out to the needy. And as a debate you had yesterday on prescription charges, that should be only given to the needy. The people who have thousands of pounds in the bank should be able to pay that themselves, you know.
Doesn't it then become a bit of a guilt trip, though, Stephen, because you see someone and you think, you shouldn't be claiming it. This is what's happening more and more with the discussions we have about benefits, that there's a sort of politics of envy going on across the street. It's like, why have you claimed it? You've got a car. Those kind of discussions aren't really healthy. You need a clear line in the sand, don't you?
I haven't got a car, mate.
Well, so you haven't got a car, but what I'm saying is people make judgments on each other about whether they are able or worthy, if you like, entitled to claim these benefits without having the full picture sometimes. You might not need it this year, but you might next year.
Well, I've been told that if you claim unemployment benefits and then they ask you for your bank statement and how much money you've got in the bank. So when you go to claim a benefit, the universal credit knows exactly how much you've got in your bank account. So if you've got thousands of pounds in your bank account, why are you claiming unemployment benefit when you can support yourself?
Yeah, and that does come into play with pension credit. Obviously, pension credit, they usually want to know at least what your income is. And I think savings as well for one part of it. Thanks for your call, Stephen. Let's take another call. Derek's in Northamptonshire. Where do you draw the line, Derek? If it's not going to be pension credit or universal credit, where would you draw the line to discover and establish whether a pensioner needs this additional fuel payment?
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, my thoughts are that there ought not to be a boundary or a level at which it should be paid or not paid. I think all pensioners should get it, including people who've achieved a great deal, paid a lot of tax, in order that they get some return on their contributions.
But they've achieved a great deal, they've paid a lot of tax, they've probably also got very healthy private or workplace pensions there. So that 300 quid is going to go straight on green fees, isn't it? Or gins and tonics down at the golf club. What is the point of us all paying for that? Because those of us who are working right now are paying to subsidise that.
Yeah, but the point is that they might say, OK, I'll put money into shares and get a dividend. They wouldn't say, oh, well, you're not going to get a return on your dividend. You are expecting a return on your dividend. That is on your investment that you would expect to get a dividend.
So the country's
like
like
reasonable.
So the country's like an investment bank now, where we pay during our lifetime and then we get a dividend. Is that what you're saying, effectively?
Well, that's one aspect, but I'd just like to make another comment, which is that there's an alternative way of dealing with this, I think, which is that everyone should get a winter fuel allowance, a number of kilowatt hours of energy at a fairly modest price. But after that number of units have been consumed, the price of energy would start to rise on a sliding scale, step by step. So therefore, people who are more wealthy, got bigger houses, using more, would pay increasingly large amounts as they tend to use more and more.
It doesn't necessarily, this particularly happens as you get older. The size of your home doesn't dictate how much money you've got in the bank. So eventually you end up having to sell your home that way because you can't afford it.
Also, the other point is a lot of the poorest people live in the poorest quality housing that's badly insulated. And that means that it's not about the size of their house, but it's actually about the infrastructure they live in, and they would be paying through the roof. I'm just really interested, Derek, if we acknowledge this tidbit, kind of universal credit for elderly people, was introduced to combat pensioner poverty, which has now been halved, would you agree it's kind of done its job and therefore perhaps half as many pensioners require it today?
Well, the way I see it is that as people get into a lower income, which most pensioners do, they have a fairly significant drop in income once they become a pensioner. Therefore, I think it's still right and fair and reasonable that they get some help with energy. There aren't that many really wealthy pensioners, I would say.
But am I allowed
those
to...
people have contributed a great deal
They have, but I just...
to enable other people who are on low incomes to actually have the winter fuel payment.
Do you think that we might have this caricatured idea of an old person being a poor person? Because actually the most asset-rich generation in our country today are those over the age of 65.
Well, I think what we're talking about here is people who are asset-rich, but possibly money poor, if that's the right phrase.
Yeah, cash flow.
Yeah.
But then you say your asset, don't you?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what Matt said. Do you know what, Derek?
Yes.
Straight thinking, straight to the point, no messing about. You for Prime Minister. Well done.
Okay. Well, listen, we'll be contacting you about that later, Derek.
I look forward to it.
So much about, thank you for your call, Derek.
Yeah, it was
so
great.
much about people's position in life, Russ, is down to luck, isn't
Yes.
it? If they are born in the right place to the right parents, have the right education, then their earning potential is much more through their life, and they have the wealth by the end of their life, but towards the end of their lives, that they can play around with. It doesn't necessarily mean that because they paid in more, they've made a greater contribution to society. Some people would say, well, they just got lucky. They were in the right place.
Well, and they could be right, but you make your own luck, I think, in life. I just have a fundamental problem, as opposed to you and perhaps some of your viewers, that you have to differentiate between pensioners over a comparatively small payment of just over £300 every year. I just find it, for me, fundamentally wrong. And I understand people would disagree with me, but I think it's divisive. And I think that it's caused this government an awful lot of problems. They're worried about their vote. They are going to come all the way back down the hill, not halfway. They might be there now. They're coming all the way back down, Tess.
And that will end up meaning there'll be less for children. I mean, they've not said where they're going to move or whether they're going to move on this 2-child cap for child benefit. And the truth is, it looks like this will be the first Labour government under which child poverty will climb. I have a child at primary school, just quickly. You talk about 300 quid, as well you may, because you're the kind of gentleman who thinks 300 quid. But actually, if you're a parent hard-pressed...
It's 300 quid.
Well, it is to you, but actually, for a child in deprivation, that could mean a year of, I don't know, something genuinely stimulating and life-changing. Like, I don't know, it sounds ridiculous, but tennis lessons that so many children get for granted that children in disadvantaged areas don't get at all. Imagine how that could change.
How much did they cost? 300 quid?
About a year. Over a year, that would probably...
Well, you don't know that.
A quick yes or no from you, Russ. If you got the winter fuel payment and you didn't need it, would you hand it back?
I would do something with it that could help people, yes, if I didn't need it.
Listen, thank you so much for your calls on this. Don't forget